In 2010, a certain acronym was ripping through the gaming industry. An acronym which had been gaining renown as a bad practice since about 2006 or so. DLC. The most infamous example of this practice, of course, was Bethesda's Oblivion Horse Armor DLC, which is more than likely where the acronym actually originated from. Of course, many developers had been releasing expansions for their games for years before DLC was coined, though the practice wasn't usually regarded with negativity by any means, just due to the sheer amount of content which tended to come with the packs. Regardless, Dragon Age Origins was no exception to the growing avalanche of downloadable content for games everywhere. But hey, Dragon Age Origins was great, right? Surely the DLC would follow this trend. Wonderful. So yeah, understandably, not too many were happy with having to pay a premium for chunks of content which ranged from half an hour to 3 hours max. Kinda makes you think that EA could have bundled all of this stuff together into a more substantial Awakening DLC. But why do that when Horse Armor was one of Bethesda's best-selling DLCs? The model was unfortunately working, and consumers continued to buy up the Warden's Keep, Return to Ostagar, the Darkspawn Chronicles, Leliana's Song, the Golems of Amgarrak, and Witch Hunt DLCs. Well, eventually Awakening did arrive, and at a whopping $40. To be fair, the DLC did add about 12 to 22 hours of content and featured events which took place after the main game. And the review scores were much more favorable than the other smattering of content which BioWare pushed out for the other DLC. But all of the shenanigans surrounding the DLC cavalcade kind of drove me away and had me looking at newer releases. And before I knew it, the years flew by without me ever touching content for a game that I absolutely love. So in this video, I'm going to run through every bit of DLC that the game has to offer, and evaluate whether I think they're good or bad, how they impacted the world and its characters, and what they do right and wrong in my eyes. I was going to go in order from the smallest DLC bits to the largest, but there does seem to be a story order for a couple of these, so I'll try to stick to that. Before I start, I've got a shirt for this video. It looks like this. It's kind of a Diablo 2 Dragon Age mixture. And also I've got another ad with Micro Center that'll run at the end of the video. Alright, let's start. So the order that I've settled on here is Leliana's Song, then the Darkspawn Chronicles, then the Stone Prisoner, Return to Ostagar, and Warden's Keep. Then I'll be hitting Awakening and then end everything with the Golems of Amgarrak and Witch Hunt. So Leliana's Song is actually a little standalone prelude type thing that you can launch straight from the main menu. I mentioned the events that happened pretty extensively in my first Dragon Age video. But the cliff notes here is that Leliana was a master thief who got fucked over when she tried to save her boss's skin, only for her boss to betray Leliana and leave her for dead. You're now playing through the betrayal bit in this one-off adventure. The intro is really over the top, heavily stylized, and a mix of hilarious and kind of lame as hell. Two of Leliana's former companions were named Tug and Sketch, which are really great names. Remind me to name one of my D&D characters Dirk Tug Sketch. Anyways, you're obviously playing through as Leliana, which is interesting in its own way because your character is fully voiced for once. Mechanically, things go as you would expect, though it's kind of interesting and fun to take a more or less new party and kind of build them the way that you want to. It's kind of hard to tell what I might run into, so choosing between Leliana's skills has me taking a higher level of lockpicking, and choosing Sketch's spells has me basically creating a mage to do with as I please. Tug's gonna be the beef. I mean, he starts with a sword and shield and his name is Tug. So our objectives are as follows. Steal shit, fight shit, and steal shit while fighting shit. I mean, yeah, it's heist themed, and I'm enjoying it to a degree, but there's only so far that Dragon Age mechanics are gonna get us. I think I would have liked a proper stealth mission here. And while you can approach parts of it stealthily, it's pretty obvious that the game wants to guide you down the chaos and fighting route, as even Leliana states at one point that this night was not about stealth. Which is weird because your next goal after she states that is to break into the Arl's estate and plant some papers. Either way, there are some optional things to do here that affect your main game, allowing you to grab up some armor for later use if you like, but as things stand I don't really care too much about it. Also, I'm unsure if it would affect an existing game, but I imagine that it would, all things considered. Either way, the tone of this whole DLC so far is, a little off-putting. Because when Leliana tells you of the exploits of the minstrel spies of Orlais, the way that she describes the group is with deadly efficiency. And while I expected it to be a bit more lighthearted, what with Leliana plundering loot, snagging the underwear off a noble and planting it on a guard captain, and generally causing a ruckus around Denerim, I guess I didn't expect her boss to tackle her and all but scissor her in the middle of the streets during an operation. Eventually you get to a point where you plant the papers, and Leliana figures out that her boss lover is into some deep shit, which I detailed in the last video. Her boss is like, yeah, whatever, we'll talk about it later. And then later happens, and she basically just lies to Leliana and tells her that they're going to undo what she's done. So everyone heads back into the estate, steals back the Orlesian papers, and surprise, the guards show up. You fight your way through them, find Marjolaine, and she stabs Leliana. See, the problem with all of this is that if you've played the vanilla game and talked to Leliana about her past, she's already told you the whole story more or less, with some events changed around. It's actually a part of what this game does best. It has the characters in the game weave these interesting stories, these intricate tales of the past or intriguing takes on current events. And Leliana, for as much as I'm relatively neutral about her character, masterfully told you about what happened to her. So Marjolaine being a treacherous bitch isn't a surprise. These events aren't a secret. And I don't think that they're told interesting enough to warrant an entire DLC. I'd have much rather watched an in-game cutscene with these events, and then maybe played from the escape onward. Get to know Leliana a little more, see how she adapted to her betrayal, where she went, how she found herself in the care of the Chantry. But as things stand, I'm playing through events that I know happened. Anyways, you get out of your cell with the help of an Orlesian Chantry mother. Then you go to Free Sketch and another dude who has a normal name, find Tug who died.
Oh no. No.
Tug.
And then finally make your escape. This escape apparently has Leliana just passing out or something, and her body gets carted off by the Reverend Mother who helped free her.
So we don't fix it, but we can set it right.
I'm not sure I know what that means.
As long as we try.
Leliana then decides to go after Marjolaine and the guy who locked her up, and we wind up doing some more fighting through this stormy area and pushing the guy off a cliff. And that's really it for the DLC. I guess the biggest issue that I have with the story elements of this DLC is that they differ from the story that Leliana tells you, but they aren't more interesting. So at the very start and finish of this DLC, you hear Leliana tell you that this is basically a version of the events which happened to her. Which makes sense, she's a bardic storyteller, right? So why not embellish some new details and spin the story a bit? The problem is that the story that we get here is even less interesting than the one that she tells your character in camp. She tells you that she was sent to kill a man and steal papers from him in Orlais, that she got captured by Orlesian guards, tortured, and eventually made her escape to Ferelden, never pursuing Marjolaine. Maybe it's a personal preference, but all of that is much more interesting to me, especially because it takes place in Orlais, which is a place that we don't get to see in the vanilla game, and we don't get to see it here either, which is probably the reason why this version of the tale is told the way that it is. It's a lot easier to reuse Denerim as a map rather than create Orlais. I don't know, I'm just not impressed with this DLC overall. For the most part, I was pretty neutral about it. The setup was lackluster, but the experience of outfitting and building a new party was fun. But the whole thing soured for me right at the end, when Leliana has this confrontation with Marjolaine that she claims never happened in the vanilla game. Again, I know it's supposed to be an embellishment, but this particular spin completely undoes the idea that Leliana never confronted her former boss and lover again. It undoes that moment when you meet this woman and she explains her motives, and Leliana spills her feelings out. It crushes the story that she tells you in camp and makes it much less impactful. Any effort that you put into talking to Sketch or remembering Tug or getting to know the new guy is all thrown out the window, at least for this game. Sketch does turn up in the next game, which is kind of cool. But I just think that this whole DLC doesn't really add much to the game at all. It's not something that makes me feel like I learned something cool or got to know some different characters better. Leliana is still the same to me, and Marge is still this embodiment of cockiness, paranoia, and short-sightedness. Either way, let's move on to our next bit, the Darkspawn Chronicles. So this DLC is an alternate timeline in which you take control of the Darkspawn in the final battle of Denerim. You're basically heeding the Archdemon's call, listening to his orders, gathering party members by forcibly indoctrinating them to follow you, and carrying on with raising the city. All throughout, the party members that you recruit get stronger when you battle or you gift them trinkets of fallen human forces. It's dumb fun, and really serves no story purpose beyond giving the player an alternative look at what could have happened. I like it, but it does have some kinks. For example, there's a point where you have to recruit a stealthy Darkspawn unit to circle around and take out some ballistas. The problem is that the rest of my group tries to engage constantly until I change their tactics to be passive, even when I tried to take the stealth unit around alone. When I eventually take the ballistas out, I lost my sword and shield, and my other two-handed warrior also lost his two-handed axe. I don't know where they went, but I could fortunately scavenge a bit while relying on my ogre to do the heavy lifting. Secondly, there's a point where I need to recruit an ogre to smash open some gates. The problem is that I've had an ogre this entire time, but the game wants me to go do this new objective, so it takes away the ogre that I got to max affinity. This completely muddles the idea that I want to build my affinities up with my group to get them stronger, as the game is willing to take them away at random. And it feels really stupid when the ogre is stuck behind a wooden gate, and I need him to smash a different wooden gate. Okay. And there was one more issue where the battle wouldn't end no matter what I did, so I couldn't progress to the final area, which was annoying. Either way, the whole thing has you killing off the good guys one at a time, which definitely makes me feel bad but is also kind of cool. It's an alright DLC, very short, but decent in its own way. I just wish they would have fleshed out the affinity system a bit more, and maybe had a way to swap between forces whenever I felt like it. Like if I recruited an ogre, a stealth unit, 2 archers, a couple of mages, and some warriors, then maybe I could swap out to whatever I felt like I'd want to use for the next battle. But either way, let's actually jump back to my main save file. Here comes the EA issues. Yeah, apparently downloading all of the standalone DLC was no problem, but doing anything in-game beyond the Warden's Keep DLC is just an impossibility from my experience. And I looked up solutions. Apparently when whole areas won't load on the map, it means that something's going on with the XML offer files which EA uses to keep track of people who actually purchase the DLC. I'm still on Game Pass, which theoretically should come with everything, but it doesn't. I tried dragging the licenses manually, loading various save files, re-downloading the game, repatching it, actually purchasing the Ultimate Edition from EA, and not a single thing I did would work. So as things stand, I'm going to start with the Warden's Keep DLC, and then I'm going to have to try to force the Stone Prisoner and Return to Ostagar DLCs to work with console commands. Fantastic work as always, EA. Alright, so Warden's Keep. This one has us meeting with a merchant who followed us into camp, one who claims that he knew Duncan. Basically, his great-great-grandmother used to be the commander in the Wardens before they were denounced as traitors by the former king, and their outpost at Soldier's Peak was abandoned. This merchant claims that he's located the outpost, and that it could prove to have lost Warden history within it, in addition to being a generally defensible position against the Darkspawn. The only issue is that any scouting party sent ahead has never returned, so it's earned the reputation of being haunted. So we head up to the thing and begin picking through the runes.
Demons? Thank Andraste you came, Warden. After you.
Well, thanks for waiting, I guess. Anyways, our guy notes that the veil is thin here, which is the reason why we keep seeing flashbacks of the king's men choosing to starve out the wardens who decided to put up a fight rather than relinquish the keep. The wardens stand strong against the starvation tactics, but ultimately wind up falling, though not to just the king's men as you would think. A note reveals that there was a more sinister force at work, one which was causing the dead to rise and both the wardens and the king's men to suffer death from nightmarish monstrosities which assaulted them. It's a decent setup, though definitely a familiar one so far. I think the thing that I'm interested in the most here is why the king suddenly branded the wardens as traitors. As you press inward, it's revealed that the wardens who were backed into a corner decided to just start summoning demons from the Fade, because that's always worked historically. I mean, yeah, you can't really blame them when they were this desperate, but that's kind of where things went awry for both sides of the conflict. Eventually, we find the merchant's great-great-grandmother Sophia, who's been possessed by a Fade demon who only wants to go free. The demon is brutally honest, stating that it wants me to go break the seal which is keeping it here, and in exchange it'll seal the Fade which is producing more demons and answer any questions that you have for it. When you ask what it'll do if you let it go, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna go fuck shit up. I'm gonna roam across the world and just feed on humans and shit. It's gonna be rad. That's, refreshingly honest. I guess the ultimatum here is that if we don't free the demon, it won't seal the Fade. But I imagine that it would have no reason to uphold its end of the bargain if we did free it. I do like the idea that the demon outright recognizes that it would die if it faced you in battle though. Not a lot of enemies in games tend to have that kind of insight. So we take its deal and shove off to the other part of this keep, where it's revealed that one of the wardens was getting to the age where the blight begins to take over the body. He decided to experiment to tame the blight and improve the joining process, which led him to basically discovering something known as Diabolist abilities. There are 3 sets of 2 abilities, one for each base class. My 2 abilities involve me taking damage over time to improve my movement speed, attack speed, and crit chance, and spraying blood at my enemies to knock them back. Gross. But that first one could come into play with how I set my guy up. It's pretty cool regardless. After this, we find the old mage who managed to extend his life to far beyond the expected lifespan by continuing his experimentation. His dialogue's a little odd because he states first and foremost that he intends to cleanse the area of demons at all costs, which makes it sound like that's what he's always been doing here. But what he's really been doing is experimenting like a mad scientist to try to research the power of the blight. That's also historically not been a great move. When we point this out, he relents to my persuasion skill and goes, "Oh, alright, I guess I'll stop the demons now." So I guess he must have just been lying before about his priorities. The interesting thing to note here is that the Wardens did actually rebel against King Arland back in the day, as he was seen as a tyrant who pitted nobles against each other and generally wreaked havoc in order to gain more power. Sophia was the one who gave the orders to begin experimenting on nobles and the like, in order to accomplish this rebellion, marking a pretty interesting turn for the usually neutral Wardens. At any rate, we can choose between Sophia or Old Man Avernus here as our options. Or I guess the demon who's possessing Sophia. I decide to stick with Avernus here just because, well, I guess I don't really care which side I choose. They're both pretty bad in their own ways, though one is a literal demon and the other one is responsible for summoning the demons. Either way, the DLC ends rather abruptly after fighting through another heap of abominations in addition to the demon possessing Sophia. You get the opportunity to either kill Avernus for his experimentation, allow him to continue his work unfettered, or have him experiment humanely for the Wardens instead. I opt for the last one, not that it affects much. The merchant promises to send his cousins up to the keep to sell you goods at a discounted rate, and that's that. It's a really short DLC. So let's see if siding with the demon yields a more interesting outcome.
Then we begin. My brethren will then... Then we begin.
Yeah, the game soft locks here and I do not know why. The demon just won't do its part. So, I guess I'm gonna look this one up on the wiki. So Sophia Dryden was a cousin to King Arland, and knew how fucked up he was when it came to doing anything to gain money and power. When he took the crown, she opposed him and was sentenced to super jail. She had supporters who bitched at the king, and so he spared her from dying and forced her to become a Grey Warden. She soon after made commander, and started plotting her rebellion against the king. That's when the king decided to disband the Grey Wardens as a countermeasure, and all of this shit went down. It's an okay background story, and I'm not too sad about missing out on the dialogue due to a bug. It is worth noting that if you keep her alive, she shows up in Dragon Age 2 as the leader of a group of blood mages before Hawk slays her, which is a cool touch. All in all, it's another okay-ish DLC. I gotta say, at this stage I would have been pissed if I paid $7 or 500 Microsoft Fun points each for this stuff. I think Warden's Keep in particular could have benefited from a more expansive map with different interesting tidbits hidden in the keep, or at least had a more interesting set of characters. I mean, the old man is the stereotypical mage who went too far and feels bad, and the demon is a demon. I think it would have been a lot more fun if the demon remained the same, but was locked away by the old man. And the old man transformed the keep into this mad scientist laboratory of fucked up experiments and dangerous trap rooms. Maybe he gasses your party and you have to escape the cells and get through his Castlevania-ass manor through loads of unique puzzles, riddles, and stitched together monsters. But as things stand, you fight some skeletons and demons, find the demon possessing Sophia, find the wizard, and then choose a side. And that's it. Took like 30 minutes. Alright, so I was hoping for the game to just figure things out after the Warden's Keep, but it didn't. And I honestly had no idea what to do at this stage. I tried to use console commands, but I couldn't get them to work through EA Play. I tried uninstalling the Game Pass version and installing the Ultimate Edition that I bought on EA Play, and the game told me that Awakening was missing now. So I tried to find the game on Origin instead, and watched as it downloaded every chunk of DLC to the existing EA Play app version of the game. When I launched through Origin, ta-da! Everything was there. I do not know how you fucked this up this badly, but the EA Play app needs to be culled. Oh my god. Oh, and one more reminder for those of you trying to get this stuff to work on PC, use the 4GB patcher to patch the game. I forgot to do that after reinstalling and crashed like 10 times in one area before realizing it. Now that we're done with the tech support section of the video, let's actually get to the Stone Prisoner, which is where we get to pick up our DLC companion, Shale. So this one kicks us off by having us talk to a merchant who's been having some pretty bad luck lately. One of his problems is that he bought a control rod for a golem, but the town that the golem is in is overrun by Darkspawn. So he gives it to me instead and I head for town. After mopping up the Darkspawn and figuring out that I run really fast with the haste and blood buff from earlier, we try to activate the golem. Of course that don't work, so we head further into the village. This is where things start to become more interesting. I find it funny how adept Dragon Age Origins is at beginning a fat chunk of its quests with really mundane stuff like, oh, this village is overrun by Darkspawn, or oh, please kill these bad guys, and using it as a platform to come up with something cooler. Which is probably why I was so let down by most of this DLC so far, since it didn't do anything too spectacular with these relatively ordinary setups. In this case, however, we find out that one of the villagers knows about the golem. He claims that the golem killed his father when he was a child, and that his mother basically deactivated it and sold off the control rod. With the way that no one knows what happened here for sure anymore, it makes me wonder if the golem was framed for the murder. Either way, the villager won't tell us how to get the thing moving again until we rescue his daughter, who made her way further into his dad's old laboratory. When we make it to her, she's speaking to a talking cat, which is obviously a demon. So yeah, you remember when I was like, oh, they should have a lab with puzzles and shit in the Warden's Keep DLC. That's kind of what this is actually, though it's a lot smaller in scope than I had hoped for. Basically, we lie to the cat demon and tell her that we'll let her go free with the girl, and then set to work freeing her from the wards here, which involves us solving a floor puzzle. Nothing makes me feel dumber than a sliding puzzle, but we'll take it. Anyways, yeah, we kill the demon after solving the thing and head back up to the villager where we get the real control rod password.
I knew that the day would come when someone would find the control rod. And not even a mage this time. Probably stumbled across the rod by accident, I suppose. Typical.
Then one wonders that you wouldn't be grateful to the one who allowed you to stretch your legs, Golem.
Another mage, I see. Charming. I was just beginning to get used to the quiet, too.
So this is Shale, and I can already tell that I'm going to like it just based off of how snarky it seems to be. It's been frozen but conscious for 30 years in this village, basically just watching people live their lives, which had to be exhausting. Likewise, Shale has no idea what to do with its newfound freedom, only remembering that it came into the service of a wizard here before it murdered him. Though Shale's not even sure if it did murder him yet, it only hopes that it did.
The last one who held that damnable rod used to call me Golem. Golem, fetch me that chair. Do be a good Golem and squash that insipid bandit. And let's not forget, Golem, pick me up. I tire of walking.
It kind of reminds me of a less evil HK-47 in a way. So Shale decides to come with us just because it doesn't know what else to do. From a combat perspective, it seems to be adept at tanking, though some offensive ranged capabilities exist. I could see replacing Alistair with it if I wanted a change of pace. Shale also only gets 2 equipment slots consisting of crystals, but I like the way that the colors change depending on what you equip. Sure, it's not much different than any other piece of gear, but it is shinier. Anyways, let's have some camp side chats and see if we can uncover Shale's background and personality a bit more. So Shale's kind of an asshole, which is about what I expected after that introduction. It constantly belittles living things, and seems to be always flaunting that it's a superior golem.
Imagine the benefits. No need to eat or sleep or perform other functions. Walk underwater, crush the heads of every opponent. The possibilities are limitless. Barring the occasional 30 years or so of paralysis, there's little to compare.
That said, Shale does seem to be prodding for approval from you despite pretending that it doesn't care about it. The cockiness seems to be a facade to mask insecurities, though I do believe that it's wholeheartedly excited to be a golem with free will. Funnily enough, Shale refers to you as it, even if you ask it not to. Shale's also pretty into the idea of being decorated with gems and crystals, probably harkening back to the soul which resides in it now. It explains that these crystals which do all sorts of things were probably the reason why the control rod stopped functioning correctly. The wizard which was commanding Shale at the time was the one popping crystals in and out while constantly commanding it to do any little task that he could come up with. It drove Shale mad, but it didn't seem to be the reason for its sudden outburst. In fact, it has no idea why it killed its master, as the last thing that it remembered before waking up paralyzed was routine experimentation by the wizard. These experiments seemed like a small fraction of the torment that Shale was put through, as it was paraded around by the wizard as a pet, told to do everything under the sun, and was even chiseled down from being 10 feet tall because the wizard's wife complained that Shale was too big. Even after it killed the wizard, the villagers would spread birdseed around to attract birds to Shale's body.
A whole village full of pigeons and ravens and sparrows all perching on me day in and day out. Those foolish villagers would spread birdseed near me, drawing the birds because they thought having birds perch on me was quaint. Quaint!
It's no wonder that Shale has a disdain for humans. Well, after the initial talks, actually it was before the initial talks, but this way makes more sense. Anyways, after the initial talks, Shale begins prodding about Caridin and the Anvil of the Void, both of which are long dead on this save file. Kinda makes me wish I had had more insight to recruit Shale before going there, but oh well. I imagine that there's some fun cutscenes all around Orzammar involving it, and I intend to drop by to see if we can still scrounge some up even with the area completed. Either way, Shale doesn't seem too pleased about the idea that it was a dwarf before becoming a golem, but is still super interested in what its past may have been, which means that we're gonna be hitting up Orzammar anyways. The last thing that it remembers about Orzammar was being in the Deep Roads, fighting some organic beings or another. Then everything went dark before Shale was carted off by the wizard who found it while scavenging. Upon taking Shale to the Deep Roads, it remembers a location, which we can head to immediately. So we spelunk on through, mowing down Darkspawn, ripping little raptors in half, crashing my game mid-battle. You know, Dragon Age shit. When we get to the end, Shale learns that it was once a female dwarf named, Shale, with a Y. Anyways, Shale with a Y had volunteered to become a golem forever ago, and that's what happened there. That's kind of a lot less story than I had hoped for, but maybe we can get some info about the former Shale's background and see if that's any more interesting. I was kind of hoping that kicking around the area where the historians reside would get a, ah yes, Shale Kadash was a dwarven noble who, or a, holy fuck, is that a fucking golem? But no dice there. In fact, that's all I could really scrounge up here. I have to imagine that we would have gotten a little more mileage out of Shale if we had taken her to meet Caridin, but I unfortunately missed out on that. Either way, when we get back to camp, Shale finally respects you enough as a friend to refer to you as you rather than it, which feels nice enough. I would say that all in all, Shale is a decent addition to the game. The source of its character and the trials that it went through are the most interesting things about Shale. And while his personality is fun in its own way, I wouldn't say that Shale is the deepest character by any means. I just kind of wish they would have done a little more with the whole Shale not remembering killing the wizard thing, and maybe had it turn out to be somebody completely different the whole time. If I were to put Shale somewhere in the companion rankings from the previous video, I'd probably place it ahead of Dog and Win, but really no higher than that. Regardless, I would say that the Stone Prisoner is definitely the best DLC that we've played so far, even if it only falls just above the grade of decent. Though, as a disclaimer, I might have had a different opinion about this if I had played through the whole game with Shale. Alright, one more before we get to Awakening. So Return to Ostagar has us stumbling upon a guy who was fighting alongside King Kalen before he got crushed like a frat party beer can. Apparently the dude was in some no-name lord's prison for a bit before he escaped and tried to make it to some wardens to deliver a key. I like how you can watch the guy get stabbed by the lord's men and then just let them walk away. Or you can watch the guy get stabbed by the lord's men, but this time they turn their heads 30 degrees to spot you standing up there like you just walked in on your parents fucking. Either way, this guy tells you that he was a friend of Kalen, and that Kalen entrusted him with this key. The problem I have here is that this dude went, yeah, Kalen totally knew that that fight was unwinnable, which is why he wanted me to give the key to the wardens in case he died, which completely ruins a lot of the Ostagar scene for me. I mean, Loghain told Kalen repeatedly to not get so excited about the battle, which painted Kalen as this kind of naive boy king who wanted to win glory and all that. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have made this stand, or that he should have been really pessimistic about the whole ordeal, but I do think that him getting all giddy about fighting Darkspawn could have been toned down a bit, and that maybe he could have been portrayed instead as someone who believed in the chance of victory, but knew that it was possible to not win there. When this guy goes, "Oh yeah, he knew he was boned," it just kind of punches that whole ignorantly excited Kaelin concept in the face. At any rate, the key leads to a chest containing important documents from the king, and this guy wants us to grab them alongside the king's sword and armor. That means that we have to return to Ostagar. Wow, what an aptly named DLC. Yeah, it's basically Mass Effect 2's Return to Normandy DLC, except with loads of Darkspawn. You kind of pick at the rubble and loot Kaelin's gear off of random Darkspawn, but it's more or less just kind of a, remember Duncan's fire? What a great memory. What about the joining? Remember when Duncan gutted Jory like a fish for being a coward? I love that. And who could forget this pile of sacks, or the game crashing? I know I can't. When we grab the key and unlock the chest, it's revealed that Kaelin really was planning on uniting with Orlais to fight the Darkspawn, and that the deal was all but sealed. Apparently, all that needed to happen was for Kaelin to confirm the alliance. I think that the only way that this makes sense is if he was literally about to march into battle when he received the confirmation, and that he locked the messages away but gave the key to his friend. But logistics aside, we go find Kaelin's body, which has been strung up like Jesus Christ. We watch all 4 cutscenes Kaelin ever had, including the one that our Warden never saw where he gets compacted like a used car in a junkyard. Then the Darkspawn attack and my game crashes, which is a refreshing change of pace for this game. So we chase this necromancer Darkspawn down, running through the entire encampment, through the tower where we fought the first ogre, down through some tunnels and out into the battlefield where the necromancer brings the Kaelin Crusher 9000 back to life. We wind up killing both of them, and then that's the end of the DLC.
You appear to be getting younger by the day.
Be careful who you flirt with, young man. When you wake up beside me tomorrow morning, I'll be back to reminding you of your grandmother.
Beside you?
You heard what I said. It would not be the first time I woke to a younger man in my bed.
Are all women this evil and conniving when they grow old?
Just me, my dear. Just me.
You know they charged human money for most of this DLC? In fact, the Stone Prisoner was free for people who pre-ordered the game or bought it new on release, which was the best one by far. I guess that's why they charged a quarter of the game's price for it later. Holy shit. These were all side quests that were decent at best and should have been included in the base game. Okay, let's just get to Awakening. So Awakening starts by stating what happened with the Darkspawn after the Archdemon was destroyed. As they fled to the coast, they split into different factions, which is a good start. But do you know what would be a better start? Fighting Darkspawn. Hell yeah. After we dispatch them, we speak to our guide who was to bring us to meet with the rest of the Wardens at their new base in Arlhau's old place. Oh yeah, your guy is the Warden commander now, which is pretty damn cool. So we plod further into the keep, where we find a human mage who apparently escaped the circle named Anders. I didn't realize that Anders was in Awakening before he was in Dragon Age 2, so that's actually really neat. But yeah, Myri is the girl who was escorting me here, and is currently taking the role of my champion tank. And Anders is our mage, obviously. His physical resemblance in Awakening to Alistair is uncanny. Either way, personality-wise, he's a bit Morrigan-ish in the way that you would expect a cocky mage who escaped the circle to be, whereas Myri is a bit Alistair-ish in the way that you'd expect a loyal member of the former Kingsguard turned Warden to be. Eventually, we meet up with our third party member, the only familiar one of the bunch, Oghren.
Hey, if it isn't the recruit with a great rack.
Yeah, he's still Oghren, and he's here to join the Grey Wardens because that's just what a chaotic force like him would decide he wants to do.
I came here to join the Grey Wardens, and from the looks of it, you could use the extra hands. Now where's the giant cup? I'll gargle and spit.
Anyways, the entire first part of this DLC culminates in saving the Warden in charge of this pile of rocks, and encountering a Darkspawn that can speak. The talking Darkspawn tells his soldiers that he doesn't want to kill more than necessary, and then orders them to kill my companions and spare me. You know, I really don't mind combat as much in this game when I'm given a good reason for it. Funny how that works, huh? So after taking him out, Alistair shows up with his entourage of royal guards. He takes note of the situation and sadly states that he can't join you, which isn't surprising. From here you can choose to conscript Anders into the Wardens, or let him be captured by the Templars. Obviously we want him, so we choose the former, which he seems pretty happy about. From here it's time for everyone to gobble down a load of grade B Darkspawn blood. Oghren downs it and doesn't pass out. Anders sips it and does pass out. And Myri fucking dies. Alright, cross that one out from the companion analysis. The game actually tricked me in that regard because she had approval and disapproval ratings based off of shit that you said to her. I'm actually all for it as it makes her death a little more surprising. Either way, we're now tasked with doing what Wardens do, driving Darkspawn away. This is probably the best moment to talk about just the sheer amount of stuff that this DLC adds to the game. It really is kind of its own minigame in terms of what comes with it, and all the new mechanics, upgrades, skills, equipment, and so on that's been dropped into it. There are 2 new specializations for each class, and you can now have up to 3 of them per character. These all come with a set of spells and talents which range from somewhat similar to other specializations to pretty damn unique. Additionally, every pre-existing class skill set gets another row of talents to expand your build further with. My dual-wielding stuff requires a load of dex, which means I'll be focusing on sinking points there. Of course, I can also get a 3rd spec, with my options being between Guardian or Spirit Warrior. Or I could grab one of the older classes too. Additionally, there are 3 new skills in the form of Rune Crafting, Clarity, and Vitality. Rune Crafting obviously lets you craft runes for your weapons and armor, and is probably the most interesting of the new skills, because Vitality just gives you a chunk of health per level, and Clarity gives you a chunk of magic or stamina. Which, while they are less interesting, they are also really important for survivability if the DLC gets rough. I have no idea if that's going to happen, but I imagine that it would at some stage. Either way, there are also 2 new tiers of armor and weaponry to scrounge up, a level cap of 35 and a way to respec your characters at any time, allowing you to restructure your own build or one of your party members if you want to try something new. I think the last thing that I want to mention here is that you can obviously import one of your characters to Awakening for its campaign, but you can also create a new one. I initially thought this was just going to be a normal character creation type thing, but without the history of your Warden being the hero of Ferelden and all that. And I kind of wondered how they would treat this new person. And it turns out that when you create your new guy, they're an Orlesian Warden who came over to help, and no one really trusts them because of it. Which is a really cool spin that actually makes this DLC replayable right off the bat. So yeah, compared to the slim pickings that we had with the DLC that I covered before now, Awakening looks like a filet mignon on a platter of gold. Which is probably why it sold for $40. Hey guys, you spent $7 to $15 for that garbage, now come pay $40 for this beautiful content that we put a load of effort into. Anyways, the game hits you with 3 quests that you can run through in any order that you want at this point. The first one is going to have us figuring out who's hitting our trade routes and crippling our supply line, and then obviously putting a stop to it. The second one has us tracking a lead to a potential opening to the deep roads that was found nearby. And the last one has us going to rendezvous with an Orlesian Warden who was sent here by the Queen of Orlais to track down info about the current Darkspawn threat's ambitions and what might be guiding them currently. All of these have us running to the city of Amaranthine, which is the major city of the Awakening DLC. While I'm not super excited about the whole blowing up a route to the Deep Roads thing, I am kinda curious about the newfound Darkspawn unification under a banner that doesn't involve an archdemon. It's all a decent start to Awakening, and all the extra stuff that comes with it makes it stand head and shoulders above everything else so far. Right as we step outside, we get hammered with side quests. I won't really run through all of them because they're pretty run-of-the-mill stuff for the most part, but one of them does involve interrogating and recruiting a roguish type who's being held in the dungeon here by the Wardens. So this is Arl Howe's son, who was caught trying to infiltrate his former home to steal back some belongings. It took 4 Wardens to pin him down and capture him. And while he isn't too happy with what happened to his shithead father, he's more upset that the Howe family has been completely ostracized because of his father's choices. That's a really good setup for a character. We'll talk more about Nathaniel in a bit along with the other new companions though. For now, we can obviously recruit him into our party, or we can hang him or let him run free, which is a lot like what happens with Anders. It's a pretty fun way to shake up another playthrough also, and it makes me wonder if you can run through this whole thing with Oghren alone. So we turn the young Howe into a Warden, much to everyone's surprise. He starts as an assassin, but I already miss Leliana's archery, so I'm gonna shape him into that. Regardless, with Nathaniel comes word of other house supporters who aren't happy with either me personally or the situations that they found themselves in. And with that, nobles fill the hall and greet me as the new commander. This puts us in a situation where we need to choose whether to allocate our soldiers to protecting the city of Amaranthine, the farms around the city, or the trade routes. Of course, you could just choose to protect all of them, which makes this whole thing kind of lip service. I mean, it's a cool idea, but I was kind of hoping for a tactical map to pop up and show benefits and downsides to allocating a certain amount of men to each location. Then maybe I could do optional missions to increase my pool of soldiers and eventually satisfy all three. Or I could do less and wind up with one happy customer. But as things stand, I believe I could just look after all three with little repercussion and wind up with everyone being happy anyways. It's actually kind of comical at times because even people like the blacksmith are like, "Oh, you need new armor for your men? Well, you're gonna have to send some soldiers to protect the miners while they dig for ore." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, sounds good. Yeah, we got soldiers, yeah, send them in." But there's never any repercussions for me just promising men to everyone. Weird. Alright, so now we're at the map, and we can go straight to Amaranthine, off to some cove, or over to an estate. I'm gonna go in order of civilization and hit the cove first. Wait, this is the fucking Leliana song DLC location that I thought was made solely for that DLC. God damn it. Oh, and apparently this is just this side quest. It takes about 60 seconds and has us fighting bandits who took a dude's daughter hostage because we don't pay ransoms around here. I guess that's why it was reused from Liliana's song. I guess it makes sense. Oh, and the estate is just a big-ass area to fight Darkspawn. I do gotta say that the golden XP gain is insane compared to the base game though. I think it might just be an inflation thing, as a lot of the really good stuff costs an insane amount of gold. And there are a few side quests which have the option to pay out gold to progress things along. Either way, let's hit Amaranthine. So Amaranthine starts out as Side Quest City, as the golden wow markers dot the street from the entry point. One of them even runs away from me, which is fun to watch.
Look for me by the house near the gates. I promise it will be worthwhile. I like eggs.
Please let us in.
My pardon, sir. I was paid a whole sovereign to give this letter to you.
Excuse me, but I need to search your packs for smuggled goods.
Alright, I'm ready to play the game now. So the big thing here is that with trade routes getting smushed, smugglers have taken to hiking up prices and, wait, if the reason that smugglers have taken over the city is because trade has slowed to a crawl, what are they peddling? Wouldn't a smuggler be bringing in contraband by definition? These guys sound more like scalpers than anything else. But yeah, I guess that's the issue here. And you can play for either side by helping the smugglers lean on people, or by helping the lawmen to fuck the smugglers up and redistribute their goods. I was actually so addled by the Outer Worlds that I thought I might be able to get away with playing both sides at the same time, but Dragon Age put me in my place immediately when I told the lawmen that I would help them. The contact that we were supposed to meet for these smugglers goes, "Wait, I saw you talking to the law," and attacks. Which, okay, to be fair, I could have just been halted by the guards and spun them a story to get by, but it's still a reasonable thing to assume when they hear my guy go, "Oh, smugglers? Yeah, I can take care of them." Now what's really hilarious is that you can actually fail both quests, which I did spectacularly. So if you continue down the smuggler hunting route, you wind up fighting a load of smugglers. You find their hideout, fight them for the key, go down this pretty tiny map, fight the leader, and then head out through the inn that it's connected to. And what you see is a couple more quest markers. One of them leads to one of the main quests, and the other has you trying to get the innkeeper here to cooperate with the smugglers, which was my initial task for them. I mindlessly tried to get him to cooperate for that sweet XP, only to realize that the guard didn't trust me now either. So yeah, I like the consequences here for my actions, and if ever there was a wake-up call that this is how quests should be structured, this would be it. It's strange going from a game that has literally no consequences to one that takes every action that you perform and treats you accordingly. Well, not every action, but you get it. Still, I'll let myself fail both as a reminder to be more cautious. Now, I will say that Amaranthine is described as this massive, sprawling city, the crown jewel of this area. And the map is, rather small, actually. It's got a tiny little market area, the aforementioned inn, a chantry, and then that's all there is to it. It took me about 40 minutes to lap around it and complete all of the quests involved that I found and had already. I know it's supposed to be one of those fill in the blanks with your imagination kind of thing, but it does feel a bit underwhelming when the keep seems to be just about as big. Either way, there's one last thing to mention here, and that's that Wynne is hanging around this area. I kind of thought that we might be able to chat with her about her position as the court mage, but oddly enough she kind of just dumps a quest on you and tells you to run along. As much as I'm happy about not having to talk to Wynne, she does say something that was pretty damn interesting that was kind of just glossed over in favor for some quest about her colleague getting lost in the woods. Basically, she claims that the libertarian part of the Circle of Magi was considering breaking away from the Chantry entirely, which is... Okay, so I never really talked too much about the inner workings of the Circle in my previous Dragon Age video, but basically there are groups of like-minded mages within the Circle which have formed opposing ideological factions. For example, the Loyalists tend to follow the Chantry's strict rules as written, and are often made fun of for it by other factions. Meanwhile, the Isolationists are those who believe that Magi shouldn't be part of society at all, and instead should separate themselves to practice their magic. While the Libertarians believe that the Circle should become self-governing, and tend to use peaceful means to try to gain independence from the Chantry and the Templars. The only reason that I mention all of this is because Wynne stating that the Libertarians are now potentially trying to break away from the Chantry is pretty important foreshadowing for the events of Dragon Age 2. I'm unsure about Inquisition since I haven't played it, but I imagine that this seemingly small aside from Wynne probably carried over into that game as well. It's actually really cool to see that kind of writing carry over into newer entries, especially when it starts as something so negligible in a DLC. It's something that BioWare excelled at during this period of time, and it always surprises me since a lot of major series tend to only look towards the really big events for inspiration when designing sequels. Let's hit the main stuff now, and I'll bring up any side stuff as it sticks out. Because as things stand, I think a lot of the side stuff is just kind of alright.
Lizard eyes?
Whoa, whoa! Go away! Excellent!
Alright, we got him. He was talking about lizard eyes.
Templars. Bloody everywhere. Must stay sharp.
Alright, we got him. He was talking about Templars.
Must keep calm, keep normal. Yes, everything is fine.
So our three main objectives have split from Amaranthine and now involve me heading to some hills, some woods, and a marsh. It's like they collaborated with Miyazaki for this. I hit the marsh first, which is riddled with werewolves. You know, if it weren't for the big fuck off sign that says, "Watch out, this place is haunted," I'd have never been able to tell that this place was haunted. But it is a relatively sprawling area, and pretty new compared to the rest of the areas that the base game has in terms of setting. I guess it's kind of like a much shittier Korcari Wilds, and reminds me a lot of The Witcher or Fable in terms of its environment. There are also these walls of fade energy which serve to section off parts of the map, which reminds me of the same kind of walls in the Circle Tower fade section of the base game. Our main goal here is to find the Orlesian Warden from before, which has us tracking signs of him all the way through this swamp. At one point we run into a new form of Darkspawn, which are fucking creepy. They're like these little baby-faced worm monsters, and I love how gross they are. It's super cool to see some new enemies pop up for Awakening, and I hope that this DLC continues to deliver. So right after we meet the Grublets, we find our Grey Warden, who was slain by some more talking Darkspawn. Or at least, one of them talks, rather. He basically tells you that his leader, known as the Mother, told him to kill the Warden to lure you here. Which doesn't quite compute, seeing as the Warden's map and journal are what led me here. Either way, the Darkspawn pulls out a big old ball of green death and transports you to the Fade. What he didn't count on though was that it would transport him there as well. He tosses his hands in the air, curses the Mother for deceiving him, and then turns down your offer to help in that order. I was kind of hoping to team up with the talking Darkspawn, but I guess that would be a little too fantastical, wouldn't it? That'd be like if, I don't know, let's say the Master Chief teamed up with a Covenant Sangheili. Regardless, here we are again, the Fade. I was initially ready to complain, but I actually wound up having a fair amount of fun in this chunk of the Fade. If anything, this is how the Fade should be in my eyes. It basically has all of those +1 permanent bonuses that the Circle Fade had before, but the whole thing is a lot more condensed. It has a puzzle, some bits where you can send a chest to the regular world to collect afterwards, a weed cave, you know, stuff like that. This entire place exists as a byproduct of a blood mage who once lived in this marsh, lording over her people. And by lording over, I mean that she took villagers' kids and used their blood for blood magic, as she claimed was her right, since those people lived on her land under her rule. Makes sense to me. I'm looking forward to giving the blood of my firstborn to preserve Joe Biden's immortality. Anyways, the villagers had an issue with this for some reason and decided to burn down the Baroness's home with her in it. So she opened up the Fade and basically forced everyone into it along with her, where she tormented them for God knows how long, seeing as this marsh is now just a wreckage-filled dump. It is a cool side story, though you wind up getting to choose between assisting a spirit literally named Justice, or the witch who just said that she owns the lives of everyone on her land.
Oh gee whiz, what a tough choice.
Well, since I truly am the grayest warden after that smuggler situation, I'll go with the obviously good choice here now and pick an obviously evil choice later to preserve my morally gray demeanor. Now, it is worth noting that the talking Darkspawn from before shows up as an ally to the Baroness, and the ensuing battle has us taking him on. So now I gotta know what happens if I go the other way. Well, it's the exact same battle, except the Darkspawn is now on the side of the people out front, you know, the one with the spirit of justice and all that. And everyone in my party approves of my decision. Huh. I guess the bigger thing here, though, is that when you get sent back to the real world by the Baroness, she comes through the veil also along with the spirit of justice, which has now inhabited the body of the Warden who died earlier. Now, what I was thinking was, well, obviously if Justice comes through after I sided with the Baroness, he'll be pissed at me and refuse to join me or help in any way. But it's pretty much the exact same dialogue no matter what you chose. Right after I complimented the game for its choices matter gameplay too. God damn it. Actually, if I did side with the Baroness, I also get to increase my cunning, health, or magic, or learn blood magic in addition to the overall party approval. That's so weird. Though I guess the party approval might have been because I tried to compromise with both sides, I don't know. Either way, I'm not going to play through both sides anymore, and instead I'm just going to stick with the first option even if I got less out of it. So Justice joins us, and I transform him into a two-handed DPS machine which can off-tank if I need be. I mean, we don't have a main tank now either, but the guy is bulky. At this stage, we're just kind of mowing down people left and right, so the tankiness really isn't a necessity. Eventually, we get back to the Baroness, who leaves no room for negotiations and turns into a reskinned ogre. Alright, that one's not fair. Her attack patterns are pretty different. It's a decent fight and it's fun to look at, but she goes down with relative ease. Afterwards, Justice has no idea what he wants to do since he's trapped here, but figures that your goal is as noble as any, choosing to take up arms to resume the former Warden's duties. Overall, this entire quest ranged from just okay to pretty good, but the whole Baroness versus Justice thing kinda scuffed the mission a bit for me, I would say. Now, before we ship out, there is actually one more thing about this marsh. Throughout it, I've been collecting dragon bones which have been scattered about. When I collected them all and inserted them into this dragon skull, a fade wall was deactivated and I could go up to face a dragon. Like I said in the past, I was never really a big fan of dragon fights in this game. They kind of have this goofy attack pattern where they wait for a moment and then attack. And if you're good enough at sticking to them, you can just make them continuously turn in circles since they have to face you to attack. Well, apparently the devs thought to correct this with this dragon, as its fight is actually completely reworked from the older fights. I actually found myself enjoying it, as it doesn't need to face someone to attack, flies around, and will actually phase into lightning balls, which I never actually found out what they did when they met with the center lightning ball, but I imagine they either heal the dragon, deal damage to everyone, or both. It was a fun fight, and I would say that it's probably on par with the Stoneface Forge fight in Orzamar's Deep Roads. Alright, let's get to our next area. I decided to drop a bunch of shit off at the keep first, which has a cutscene of the mother which the Darkspawn mentioned serving before. She's a batshit insane brood mother, which makes me wonder how the Darkspawn have organized so well. But still, it's a cool ass cutscene. Her babble doesn't make a ton of sense right now, but maybe that'll change. Beyond this, there's actually one quest of note here that I really enjoyed. So as the Warden Commander, you basically get the opportunity to rule over and make decisions on civil, criminal, or other court matters for the area. So basically you're the judge, jury, and executioner for a lot of folk around this area. Matters include a man who stole food from the crown to feed his family after the Darkspawn attacked his farm. A noblewoman who was promised income from a bridge by Arl Howe for aiding him in his conspiracies, and a noble man who was accused of killing a woman. Your decisions here can range from letting people go to executing them, rewarding or denying property, and so on. I really enjoy it even if the consequences aren't always far-reaching. I wound up deciding to take the thief into the service of the knights, rewarded the noble with her promised bridge money while ensuring the man who owned it previously that it would be made up to him, and imprisoned the accused murderer. So next up is the woods. The woods are initially a pathway of non-stop fighting, as the encounters seem to be paced out just close enough to each other that I wind up having to kill off the entire first chunk of the map before I can loot it. Our caravan trading route problem seems to come in the form of these wagons being crushed and set ablaze, which matches the description that we were given. Our enemy types include bandits and treants. Treants, whatever, it's a fucking made up word. Which were spurred to life by a pissed off elven woman deeper in the woods. She pops up at one point and goes, "Hey, fuck you." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Give me back my sister." And then she leaves. Okay, nameless companion. Obviously there are other quests tied to this area which mostly involve picking up items or taking inscriptions from statues or discovering materials for people back at the keep to work with and the like.
I was a man to be feared, a man of war.
There's also a puzzle, which is always a nice addition. But our new ally Leliana is the main focus here, as tracking her down has us encountering a dude who got fucked up by Darkspawn before escaping. He claims that the Darkspawn were the ones who kidnapped Leliana's sister, and that they planted the human weaponry near the elven camp, effectively pitting the two forces against each other. Like I mentioned before, I do like this development of the Darkspawn growing a brain, because having enemies who do treacherous shit like this is way more enjoyable than them being just big bad monsters. Either way, we get to Leliana, who doesn't trust us until we show her a necklace which belonged to her sister, which we found on a Darkspawn's corpse. Which, I mean, she believed we were working for the humans to kill or enslave her up until this point. This could have just been a lie from me. But whatever. She gives in and decides to accompany us to a nearby mine where she thinks that the Darkspawn came from. I do gotta say, I think the Spirit Warrior perk I have on is causing my guy to look, out of focus, and it's really distracting because I look like a picture of Bigfoot at nearly every given moment.
Why should we assist her at all?
Because she's a looker. What do you think her sister's like? Whew.
Anyways, Leliana's a mage, and who gives a shit which kind, I'm re-rolling her into a battle mage. Except that nearly all the big elemental spells have friendly fire on them, so I kinda gotta get creative here. Still, 2 mages and a dead guy, let's rock. So we get to the mines and all of us step on this magical rune filled with chloroform and get promptly carted off to jail after passing out. Good work, team. I like the concept that a ghost who might potentially be able to survive while their body decays can get knocked out from sleep magic. But anyways, this is our next talking Darkspawn, who seems a lot more well-spoken than the previous models. He claims that he doesn't want to fight us, and that he's been forced into the position of doing this to us. He heals my guy up, outfits him in cute little prison clothes, and gently tosses him into jail with the rest. Then Leliana's sister shows up, apparently indoctrinated but not really? She has the eyes of a spawn lord but the heart of a human. She takes a look at my Loch Ness monster looking ass and the unpainted Warhammer model that is her sister and then frees us while telling us to haul ass out of here. This is a kind of an odd escape sequence. So we don't have our shit, right? And yet we gotta fight through the whole underground area without it because it's been taken from us. So I assume that we're not going to be able to take on the Darkspawn with no gear, and I just start running. Well, my party just kind of obliterated the Darkspawn with no gear, and then I realized that I had all of my other inventory with me still. Like, they left all this shit in my pockets or backpack or whatever, so I just outfit them with what I have instead. It's weird. I never feel like I'm in any danger on normal difficulty. And I thought that being stripped of my gear at the very least would change that. I feel like there's a missed opportunity here to crank the difficulty and make things a bit more interesting mechanically. Because there's a point where the game lets you smash a big load of Darkspawn with a ballista. And I thought, hey, that's kind of a cool way to skirt a big fight with no equipment. The whole level could have been designed around setting off traps, rigging explosives, and so on. But instead just features that one way of lessening a single fight, and that's it. What's also annoying is the gear that we had on has been placed on humans who have been experimented on, which would have been a less aggravating concept if I had a button to auto-equip it back onto my people. but I just can't help but feel that stripping down before the sleeping gas cutscene would have been the better way to proceed here. Especially when I wind up missing the experiment who had my guy's gear and wound up going too far with no way back. I had to reload an old autosave to go track it down, and then replay the next bit, which was annoying. Either way, the new talking Darkspawn sends 2 mini dragons at us with a penchant for spamming up B throughout the fight. They actually disappear so often that it sometimes ends the fight for a moment and kills my berserker buff. Eventually they get taken out, and the Darkspawn escapes with Leliana's sister and a dwarf that looks a lot like the one who went crazy down in the Deep Roads. I think it's her, but I haven't really been able to confirm it yet. If only I brought Oghren. Still, Leliana is pissed and demands that I make her a warden so that she can track down the Darkspawn and rescue her sister. Justice is pissed off, and he says his catchphrase.
She should not be allowed to escape justice so easily.
Yeah, he's not happy about her killing human soldiers and bandits because apparently this guy has one mode. Like, she thought that these people took her sister and attacked her camp, and he's like, well, I don't give a shit about that because she was wrong. Alright, dude. Well, that's the end of the woods. So we got one more task to go before the end of this thing. Of course, I stopped by the keep before that, which has us encountering an angry mob who was spurred to revolt by some former members of Hao's regime. Basically, they want food because they're starving. Now here's the stupid bit. So I have Master Coercion, right? A silver tongue that can persuade just about anyone, supposedly. And likewise, I have my persuasion and intimidation options. If I persuade the mob to listen, they'll listen. If I persuade them again, they're like, fuck that, and we have to kill them. If I intimidate them, they're like, fuck that, and we have to kill them. But if I persuade them once, and then I tell them, wait, hang on, we'll just give you food. They're like, oh, yeah, neat, sounds good, fam. Now I did look into this, and persuasion works like this. Each tier of coercion is worth 25 points, so the max tier is 100 points. Now a persuasion check is 25 times the tier, plus my cunning minus 10. So with 16 cunning, my persuasion is 106. My intimidate does the same thing, but with strength. So my intimidate is 140. I failed both of these checks despite the game's rules supposedly allowing me to pass any check if I have 100 points here. The reason for this is that the game changed the rules here, which probably also explains the whole landsmeat issue that I brought up in my first video. According to the wiki, the only way the second persuade option will work is if I'm not saying all of that. What the fuck? If you're gonna have a set of rules in place, changing them up like this without explanation is really stupid to me. Especially when, fundamentally, the option that I chose which got the peasants to stand down and the persuade option that I failed are basically the same dialogue. One of them says, I will provide for my people, and the other one says, we will give you grain. Which I guess in the first case, my people could have been anyone, but I don't know, they seem like the same dialogue option. And then if you do get into a fight, my companions will still interact with each other and have unique dialogues throughout the fight, which is really stupid. It's actually something that's been happening the entire time, and it's been really distracting because it never happened in the base game. I don't know, the whole ordeal is just really stupid. At any rate, speech system aside, heading back to the keep has us being jumped by assassins who this lady from earlier hired because she was loyal to Hao. I like how this entire time my closest advisors were sitting here like, alright, so some of these nobles are definitely going to try to kill you, but we don't know how they're going to do it or who they are. And it turns out to be one of the nobles from earlier who was super standoffish when meeting with me. And her method of attacking me is just a full-on assault from the front. Instead of poisoning me, trying to get me in my sleep, kidnapping a close ally, luring me alone into an area, or anything that would require a brain to come up with, she goes, I liked Hao, he was cool and you killed him. Yeah, I also killed the fucking archdemon and stopped the blight, but yeah, sure, go ahead. Just attack whenever, I guess. I'm sure you're gonna get this.
Barrel's been hit. It looks glancing.
That's a glancing blow? I guess I glanced my wrist bones one time when they fractured while playing football. Alright, let's hit the hills. So the hills feature a big-ass rift of Darkspawn that 2 hunters kind of stumbled upon while they were hunting. We're here to investigate it and wind up running into our last companion for the DLC here, the Dragonborn. She's a rogue who was here investigating the whole Darkspawn thing before the rest of her party got carted off or killed. She basically confirms what we know, that the Darkspawn are smarter and more organized than before, and that they're now actively creating an army. I decide to add her to my collection of Wardens and respec her to be a full-blown DPS just to see how not having a tank works out for me. Turns out that it actually works pretty well, as we get the option of infiltrating the side passage of this buried dwarven city, or just heading through the main gates. I chose the latter, and yeah, no issues. We fight our way through, seeing flashbacks of a war that was fought here long ago. Eventually we drop in on two factions of Darkspawn fighting each other, which is cool, but I mean I've been waiting for this entire DLC for them to expand a little more on what's going on. The problem is that the DLC literally leads with this idea of two factions of Darkspawn that now exist and are vying for power, with each side using their own methods. But I can't tell which side is which. I can't differentiate who's using what method. I guess in hindsight, since I know who's who now, it is a little more obvious, but at the time I didn't know. It was all Darkspawn to me. This one talks, this one talks, this one talks. I didn't know which ones were the leaders or which side they represented. And we really only got some random cutscene of a broodmother that seems to be in charge of at least one side, and then nothing really else discernible beyond, "The Darkspawn are smart now!" I think this whole thing would have been a lot better if they had not led with the whole, hey, there's two factions, at least if this is the way the story was going to play out. Otherwise, I would have wanted to at least been able to identify which side was which and who the key players were this far in. Either way, I'll skip to the meat of the hills area now. So the little grubbers can walk now, which is awesome, and we love to see it. Though I hate that they have the same kind of overwhelm attack that spiders have, because it means that I have to stare at my guy getting pummeled for 10 seconds at a time. There's also this puzzle here, which is really easy but fun to look at. And then finally we make it to where one of the leaders of the Darkspawn is duking it out with another, which ends with this golem tearing one of them in half. Sick! From what we can gather here, it seems that one faction serves the mother while the other serves the architect. That would be this kind lady from the cutscene prior and this strapping fellow who's gathering females at an alarming rate. But that's about all we find out right now. The final thing that we do in the hills area is approached really oddly, because we're plodding along and suddenly tentacles start doing their thing, which yeah, sure, it's probably a broodmother, but we don't get a cutscene showing that there is one or anything like that. We just get a room with a big ass spiky boulder dangling over a pit. When we hit some chains, the thing falls and crushes like 3 broodmothers in a pit. Why were they there? What's this rock? No one knows, but the most important thing is that we did it. And now Sigrun can join us as a warden. Alright, I guess it's back to the keep then. We get one more cutscene where the titty monster continues to lose her shit about us messing things up for her, which is, man, the voice actress is solid for this role.
Poor pets in Carl Hero. The father knew I would send them against him. The father feared.
So now we're back at the keep, and I think now's about as good a time as any to really cover what these new companions are about. We won't be taking a look at Oghren, but I do want to look at every other companion's personality, backstory, and how well they're written overall. It's worth noting that you can't just approach them and ask them questions like you can in the base game. Instead, you raise their affinities with gifts and correct responses as usual, and then they'll come to you whenever you pop into wherever you're holed up at the time, or will enter conversation only when you've met a certain affinity or gift requirement. They all have personal quests which you can complete throughout your playthrough, and gifts which correlate to them. Let's start with Anders. Like I mentioned, Anders plays a lot bigger role in the sequel, where his character is fleshed out quite a bit more. Still, this DLC has us coming to understand his beginnings as a circle mage who managed to escape the tower and Templar custody 7 times before getting recaptured by the Templars each and every time. As such, the guy doesn't care too much for the lot, and he explains that the ones which were in the process of escorting him back again used to kick him in the head to wake him before they fell in battle with the Darkspawn. That said, he isn't heartless for as much as he initially exudes that kind of personality trait. He does care about the safety of others, which sets him wholly apart from the initial Morrigan-esque archetype. Though that said, he almost constantly jabs at Oghren for being Oghren, and it usually winds up with Oghren standing up for himself much more competently than he's been able to with Morrigan.
You don't actually think your jokes are funny, do you?
Could have sworn that fly was buzzing again.
Har!
Let me tell you about my life in one word.
Oh no, don't take me back to the tower. I'm far, far too delicate.
I'm not only a dwarf, I'm a moron. Listen to me fart.
Oh no, big Templar man. What are you going to do with that sword?
Ew.
In fact, Anders is basically like a more clever Alistair if I were to keep comparing him to former companions. A lot of what he has to say about others usually has him cracking jokes about sensitive subjects in some sarcastic way or another, much to the other companions' chagrin.
You know, Nathaniel, you're just like me.
Am I now?
Everyone hates your family for something terrible they did, even though you weren't involved.
I hope you have a point, Anders.
It's like you're a mage. If there were more hows, they'd lock all of you up in a tower to protect everyone else.
A thrilling analogy.
He's also relentlessly horny and talks about women constantly.
Have I ever told you that I find tattoos on women incredibly attractive?
You escaped your circle? Repeatedly? For a woman?
Well, not for her, but she made being caught more fun. And here I thought I'd retire to the country with a plump wife and several nubile mistresses. Look at that! Was Andraste really that much of a looker?
Anyways, so the reason why Anders kept trying to escape the circle was for freedom. It's something that he seems to value above all else, claiming that mages almost seem to need permission just to be alive. He hated that he always seemed to be monitored, that he wasn't allowed to just simply exist. It's his reason for escape, and probably accounts for why he's so direct with everyone else, even when it clearly isn't welcome. As such, his personal mission involves him trying to completely break from the control of the Templars, which has him wanting you to find his phylactery, which they can use to track him at any time and destroy it. Well, this turns out to be a trap set up by the Templars who wait for us in ambush. It's weird because... So Alistair was the one who oversaw the whole exchange with us bringing Anders into the fold. So even if the Chantry does command quite a lot of power, you would think that they would just have to let this happen. But they claim that they have the authority to arrest him or kill him or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish when taking on the savior of Ferelden. It just doesn't seem like they would get away with it. But maybe they didn't plan on it and only cared about putting Anders into the ground no matter what the cost. Either way, this is the end of the quest and pretty much everything to do with Anders for this DLC, which is very abrupt. I mean, I think I gained like plus 30 affinity in around 2 minutes or so with this quest. But yeah, I do like Anders, but I also think that they could have done a lot more with him here, especially considering his bigger role in the next game. Being a How, you would think that Nathaniel would have some of that charm which rivals a skeleton in a clown outfit that his father exuded, but he's actually a pretty modest dude.
You're going to love this. Trust me.
He is proud of his family's history, but he isn't proud of his dad's choices. You see this a couple times when he mentions that he knows that his dad made some mistakes, and that his family deserves better. Finding his grandfather's old bow in the basement of the ex-Howe estate has him remarking that he thought his father would have burned it, but is really happy that he didn't. I do like this character development because it's probably the second most interesting thing that you could have done with Rendon Howe as a character. Keep him an asshole, but make his son a good person. I think the more interesting thing would have been to completely salvage Howe's character somehow. Show that his path actually wasn't that horrible, that he wasn't a monster, and that maybe somebody was behind the scenes and forcing him to do the shit that he did. The only issue is that you would have to write that idea perfectly, because if you make it too unbelievable, it's gonna seem really cheesy and stupid for him to have been so cruel before. And if you make it too convenient, it makes his actions look way too over the top to have not been an asshole to some degree. I guess the only way that this would have worked is if Howe had more dialogue and encounters throughout the vanilla game, and if you could have gotten this scenario out of him in some form or another. But yeah, I would say that this alternative with his son is still really good. Regardless, the guy still cares about his dad, as well as his brother and sister. The brother died fighting, but his sister wound up marrying a shopkeeper in Amaranthine, which is where Nathaniel's personal quest takes place. As you travel with him, he begins to understand the importance of becoming a Grey Warden, mentioning that his grandfather went off to join them and never came back. He claims that he was ashamed of his grandpa for a long time because of it, since his dad had drilled it into his head that his grandfather abandoned the family to a pointless cause. It's cool to see Nathaniel work through these issues and kind of understand his lot in life, going from trying to kill you to realizing that he may have been wrong. Though, to be fair, he kind of made up his mind about that before you even met and decided that he just wanted to loot his own belongings instead. Nathaniel's personal mission has him catching up with his sister, who is happy with her new husband in Amaranthine. She escaped Arl Howe's clutches and denounces him as an evil man who did horrible things, much to Nathaniel's surprise. At this stage, Nat still believes that his father was a good person who just messed up a lot of his political choices, but his sister sits him down and tells him the truth. The cool thing is that he doesn't just deny it like you might expect. He takes his sister's word for it and decides to mull over the idea that his father wasn't the great man that he thought he was. Soon after, he goes from skirting any negative talk about his dad's character to outright blaming him for desecrating the Howe's legacy. It's a great character development, and it really makes me like Nathaniel even more as he tries to figure out how to restore the Howe name through his own actions. So yeah, Justice is going to be pretty direct as far as analyzing his character goes. I mean, he's quite literally the spirit of a sense of justice, which has inhabited the body of a man who had a life and memories. Most of his personality is that he wants justice. He wants to avenge the fallen, slay the wicked, bring peace to the land, and all that. So the most interesting bits about him are more about the process that he's going through and less about his personality, though there are some minor character traits which shine through after getting his affinity up. He notes that the spirits which aren't demons in the Fade tend to pity mortals and treat all of them exactly the same. He claims that after getting to know you that the spirits should help some of the mortals, at least the ones who deserve it. And he's overall surprised by the inherent beauty of the mortal realm, which does lend a bit more to fleshing out his character. At one point, Nathaniel asks what would happen if the body that he's inhabiting dies. And while Justice has no idea for sure, he imagines that he'd just drag the bones around, which is horrifying. But the more important thing here is that the Warden whose body he took over had a wife in Amaranthine. When she learned that her husband was alive, she paid a visit to the keep, only to discover that Justice is now using her husband's corpse like a sock puppet. Obviously, she's upset by this news, and she runs back to Amaranthine, or gets a taxi or something, I don't know. Well, Big J here feels like something needs to be done to make the former Warden's wife feel better. Which, no, dude, just let her be. I actually tell him that, and he responds by saying his catchphrase, "No, justice must be served." This setup isn't horrible, but I do wish that the wife had asked a few more questions before running off. I mean, you're like, "Oh no, your husband died, dude." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean? My husband died, what do you mean by that?" And Justice is like, "Ah, right, yeah, no. I'm a ghost who inched his way into your dead husband's body like an oversized fleshlight." And she's like, "Oh man, I really like that guy," and then just runs away. It just feels like there should have been some more questions before the acceptance bit. Unfortunately, this kind of continues during the actual confrontation, if you could call it that, when Justice corners his body's wife in the chantry. I'm just gonna let this one play out.
Aura, please do not be alarmed. I do not wish to frighten you.
You are in my husband's body.
I am a spirit of justice. I meant your husband no harm. I would ease your distress had I the power.
I knew when he left that this could happen. He told me. His father died a Grey Warden too.
Tell me, is there anything I can do for you? Tell me, and I will do it.
Avenge him, spirit. I will wait for his ashes a little longer, if it means that whoever did this to him will pay.
The Darkspawn.
That was the most anticlimactic conclusion of a ghost who's commandeering a woman's dead husband. I am Justice. Yeah, good. Okay, well, we'll just become Justice and avenge my husband then. Yes. I think we're just gonna file this one away as a dud. Overall, Justice is, a one-dimensional character for the most part. The thing is, every once in a while he starts to have these thoughts of what his purpose is, and how mortals treat each other. He doesn't understand the reason that elves are treated like shit. He doesn't understand why some spirits turn into demons. He enjoys the beauty of nature and the mortal world, and is afraid of his body withering away. But beyond these small moments, his overall character seems to just resemble his name. I mean, yeah, it makes sense, but it doesn't always serve for an overall intriguing character development. It'd be one thing if he figured himself out and decided to start pursuing some ambitions which he develops. Maybe he decides he wants to travel the world, or start a mercenary outfit which only takes on noble tasks, or begin studying philosophy to better understand human nature, eventually becoming a nomadic preacher. And I understand that a lot of this is kind of post-game stuff, but the roots could have at least taken place here, and the building blocks are definitely in place for something like that to happen. I do know that he shows up in Dragon Age 2 at one point, but I don't remember him ever really expanding any further than his initial character. At least again, from my memory. I don't know. So Vellana's an elf, as she makes immediately and abundantly clear. I've said it before, but I'm not a huge fan of the stereotypical nature-loving elf. I mean, it's just so easy to write that kind of people. You have them say some elvish language stuff every couple of words, you have them complain about cities and boast about nature, and you generally make them arrogant about their culture while not trying too hard to accept other people's cultures. It's kind of why Zevran was such a great counterexample to the stereotypical elf, because he didn't wear a big sign around his neck that said, "Hey, I'm an elf," and he had so much more to his person than his race. So what about Vellana?
Anathara. What's the point of having walls? I'm just as cold in here as out there. It is unsettling, sleeping under this ceiling. Have I ever told you that I find most humans physically and morally repulsive?
Good to know.
Yeah, she's kind of a flashcard that has the word elf written on it. Except that she does at least have ties to the unique thing about Dragon Age elves, which is that most of them were enslaved and are treated like shit by humans in particular. So the disdain for humans makes a lot of sense here. The big thing that Vellana tends to lament besides her sister being turned into a fucking monster is that her people's culture has been pretty much erased. That the dwarves can talk about their paragons and the humans can recall their heroes, but that the Dalish history is very sparse due to it basically being burnt to cinders. Likewise, the best gift that you can get Vellana is a blank book for her to start writing tales of her own for her people, which is actually pretty cute, truth be told. But personality-wise, Vellana is pretty standoffish, as you might have been able to gather. She's not the most unapproachable person, but she is a little cold in general. There's a stage where we run into her old clanmates, who kicked her out of the clan because she was too filled with rage for them, apparently. It's not really expanded much on at the time, but the guy we talked to more or less tells her that he knew that something like this would happen with Vellana's sister when she chose to follow Vellana after being exiled, since Vellana's always been so hateful. I mean, it kind of makes sense. All it took was obviously planted piles of weapons to start getting her to fling trees at humans. When we do eventually get the story out of Vellana, it turns out that the humans had begun attacking her clan for getting too close to their farmland. In a fit of rage, Vellana demanded that the clan retaliate against their aggressors before calling their leader a coward and marching off with several other elves to fight the humans. All of them died besides her and her sister, which was a tough lesson for Vellana. She learned from her mistakes and her anger, or so she claims. She regrets what happened, and it makes her a lot more approachable. And that said, for as much as she claims that she regrets her decisions, she was still going at humans even when we arrived to pick her up. I guess you could say that she's learned to be more tolerant throughout our journey, but it's all a rather fast character development. Plus, honestly, I understand her disdain for humans and the actions which stem from that disgruntlement. Which is good, because that was one of the things that stuck out as a stereotype at first. Still, the flip-flopping between the two does come fast and loose, and I think that Vellana really would have benefited from just more dialogue and another quest in general. Either way. Sigrun kind of annoys the shit out of me. Not so much for what she says to your guy in conversation, but more because of what she says during combat and exploration. Here are some examples. If she goes into stealth, she says shit like, "on my tippy toes," or "quiet as a nug in a rug." If you can't pick a lock on a chest, she says, "fail." If she kills an enemy, she says,
"Oh, did I do that?"
Like she's just a menace to travel with. And it feels like traveling with someone who's really socially inept. But exploration comments aside, Sigrun in general is just really strange. She always seems to have death on her mind. She constantly states that she's ready to die fighting Darkspawn, but She always says it in a very pessimistic way. It kind of suits her role as part of the Legion of the Dead. I never really mentioned these guys too much in detail in my first video, but the only time to my knowledge that we encounter them is when we're headed to the Broodmother in the Deep Roads, and the leader of their unit told us that we're fucking insane for running across a bridge filled with Darkspawn. Again, that guy was pretty adamant about not caring if he died, he just didn't want to do it for no reason. They're basically an elite group of dwarven fighters who resemble the Grey Wardens in many ways, especially in that they'll take anyone who's willing to join them from any caste. When a Legion member gets ready to enter the Deep Roads, they never plan on returning to Orzammar. A commemorative funeral is held for them, and they're officially recorded as dead. This first death is a celebration, as any troubles that they may have been caught up in are now officially wiped from their records, and they're instead remembered as extremely honorable. This kind of culture surrounding the way dwarves view those who would be willing to die fighting their greatest enemy is pretty cool. And it explains a lot better what kind of mindset that someone who is part of the Legion more than likely has. So yeah, to Sigrun, she's basically already dead in her people's eyes. On the surface, she's very basic in terms of her knowledge and personality. She talks about killing Darkspawn. She wants a spyglass to see them coming from further away. She's not used to the surface being so open. Stuff like that. But then when you click on the books behind her, she mentions that she only ever learned how to read because a friend in the Legion taught her through a single book that he brought. She wants to read more now that she has access to them, and she worries that she won't be able to read them all before she dies to the Darkspawn. It's not that death is always on her mind because she's ready for it, it's because she fears it tremendously. And she constantly seems to want to throw herself into death as almost a coping mechanism.
Fighting a horde of Darkspawn with almost certain death awaiting? Don't even think of leaving me here, Captain.
Whereas the rest of the Legion seems to not care if they die, Sigrun's a poor peasant from the streets of Dusttown who was taught that survival is the #1 priority in life. It explains her lack of personality at times, and I would say that it makes her relatively well written. The thing is though, I kind of get mixed signals from her constantly. She's blunt and very naive with a lot of her dialogue, but then she's clever and sarcastic with Anders when they interact. She's all about survival because she came from Dusttown, but she's almost excited about dying because of that perceived coping mechanism. It's not necessarily a horrible way to write a character, but it's confusing to try to get a handle on at times, and makes her seem contradictory quite often. I like her inclusion, but there's only so much that she's going to add to the game. So where I wanted more out of the game for people like Anders or Nathaniel, I think we get the perfect amount out of Sigrun. Her personal mission is actually something that I couldn't do though, because you get locked out of it if you complete the quest for the smugglers or the guards at the very start of Amaranthine, which is about the stupidest fucking thing that I've seen because those quests literally have 2 separate people at the very beginning of Amaranthine flagging you down to talk to you. So you have to have the foresight to just ignore them until you come back with Sigrun. Either way, the wiki says that Sigrun was part of the Dwarven Mafia, and she got into trouble and was exiled, which is why she became a member of the Legion. The quest likely would have endeared Sigrun a little more to the player, but it doesn't give us too many shocking revelations. All in all, I would say that half the companions are welcome and interesting characters who add a lot more to the game and that I actually wish that I got more out of. For them, the amount of questing and dialogue that they're directly involved with is lacking, and it makes me wish that they could have been recruited in the base game. But for everyone else, the amount of questing and dialogue was perfect without fundamental changes to their characters. Justice and Sigrun in particular needed a lot more ambition in another direction besides, I want to fight and kill shit. And Valana's kind of in the middle ground where she starts to develop and learn a lesson, but then the DLC kind of comes to an end. I think that it's hard to go from a 40 to 80 hour game or more depending on how quickly you go, to a 10 to 20 hour DLC, and still get the same kind of development that you would get from the former. I almost think if they just slimmed the new companions down to 3, added 2 from the base game, and doubled up on interactions for the new people, that probably would have been the better way to approach everything. Now, all that said, there is one thing that I didn't mention just because I didn't want to include Oghren, but he does have a quest here. And it's a lot more interesting than a lot of the other companion quests because it plays off of the base game. So the reason why Oghren ran off to join the Grey Wardens was because he wound up getting together with that woman who he tracked down to the bar that was at the lake across from the Circle. Apparently they had a kid too, and she wanted him to stay with the army and, be a husband. Well, he didn't want that. He wanted to keep running around and killing shit and getting drunk. So yeah, he decided to continue being the sleaziest fucking dickhead that he could be. But he's still pretty funny, so we'll give him a pass. I mean, it's like a really renowned actor or athlete or musician getting away with being a scumbag when they aren't acting, playing their sport, or singing. Yeah, sure, they're a horrible piece of shit, but man, they know how to act, and play sport, and make music. Gotta give them a pass there. Now, unfortunately, I didn't realize that this was going to be a thing with Oghren, so I didn't even get to see the scene where Felsi comes in looking for him until it was too late to travel anywhere else in the game. And to finish it, you have to pretty much give Oghren every single gift that he likes, plus a few others potentially. His quest is the hardest to round out, unless you count Sigrun's quest just straight up not working. But regardless, the wiki basically states that Oghren reflects on being a family man, and decides that he's really not cut out for it. You can convince him to at least try to be part of his child's life, and he considers it. The epilogue is apparently also bugged, and no matter what you do with Oghren, the ending slideshow says that he considered being a family man and decided against it. So yeah, another bug for the bug gods. Either way, let's get to the end of this thing. This is another really odd set of decisions when approaching this DLC, because I realize now that I never actually chatted with a certain NPC to turn Leliana into a Grey Warden. I didn't think I had to, honestly. And the last time I did talk to him, there was the whole peasant uprising and assassination attempt going on, so I didn't think to talk to him again right after that. So when I do go to talk to him about Sigrun and Leliana joining up, there's no option to do so because the Darkspawn have now assembled an army and are getting ready to attack Amaranthine. So yeah, I can't make Leliana a warden at all now, and I never even got the chance to make Sigrun a warden. It feels like I was just supposed to do the marsh last, despite getting the choice to do so first if I wanted to. I mean, what, it had the Fade, werewolves, a dragon, the holy ghost of a concept, and then of course the ghost can't be wardenified. Well, actually, I guess he technically already is with the body that he puppeteered. I don't know, I guess if you're going to give me the option to quest in any order, maybe locking me out of certain chunks of story or questing might not be the best move. On the other hand, I guess it does lend to some replayability in a way. Oh well, let's get to the siege. This is a very quick trip, as we only wind up fighting a single battle outside of Amaranthine before one of our guys goes, "Yeah, fuck this place, too many spawn, let's burn it down." Hell yeah, I'm all for that. What happened here is that apparently this place has been under attack by the Mother's forces, and her brand of Darkspawn goo is particularly potent in the whole infection department. So we can try to charge in and save the city or burn it to the ground. I think the second option is more extreme, and it's not like I actually care about Amaranthine. I know that typically a fort is created to defend a city, and that wardens are supposed to give their lives to defend civilization, but just being able to raise a city is a fun option that I usually wouldn't pick. Plus, a messenger from the architect comes running up to tell us that the keep is under attack, and I care way more about those guys. Well, burning down the city is about as dramatic as I hoped for it to be. It's actually kind of funny because Anders is like, whoa, what the fuck? You can't burn down a city. It's like the central trade hub and there's a bunch of innocent lives in there. And I'm like, whoa, come on. What about everyone at the keep? And he's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Plus, we've been told that nobody's been left alive inside of the city walls.
Amaranthine is just a shell now. No one lives.
Yeah, that's looking pretty empty to me. All I saw in there were Darkspawn.
You're very good at saving people from certain death, aren't you?
So yeah, we get back to the keep and everyone's stoked that we made it back and definitely aren't willing to talk about our war crimes. I'll touch on what would have happened if I had defended Amaranthine in a bit. So this is it, the big defense. I actually generally like this mission quite a bit barring some jank which happens towards the end. But basically throughout the DLC, I've been completing these little quests to fortify the keep, get experimental explosives created, outfit soldiers with good weapons and armor, and so on. And that all pays off here. Basically, the more that you sink into the side stuff, the better prepared you'll be for this battle. I'm unsure what it all affects, but I do know that I had access to an archer who could smack people for 300 damage every here and there when I pointed out a target, and an explosive bombardment option. The only thing that I didn't really care for was the fact that I had these 3 separate forces. One of them seemed to be some poor fucking infantry. Another seemed to be some peasant archers. And the last one is described as an elite unit of knights who have trained their entire lives. Yeah, I'm just gonna use those and only those. And sure enough, none of them die the entire time. So there was really no reason for these other two options to exist. I guess unless I wanted archers, I don't know. I just think this whole system was done better during the Siege of Denerim. But either way, I overall enjoyed myself, and I love the idea of a lot of my little actions coming together at the end of the game to really pay off in some way or another.
You must succeed!
We've won.
Yeah, I think the code gave up on the game at the very end here. Our final task is to chase down the Darkspawn who have retreated back to their lair. I have a lot to say about the plot progression here, but I'm gonna hold off until we get to the end of this thing. So we head off to the Dragonbone Wastes. There's a dragon there to my surprise. We scoop out its kneecaps and continue on to the next area where we encounter the Architect once again. This time, instead of putting us to sleep and sicking experiments and dragons on us, he chats with us. What he says is that he was going to explain everything before he got interrupted last time. But what really happened was that we broke out of his fucking prison and he was like, oh shit, I guess I can't get away with that. So this guy was the first of the intelligent Darkspawn. He doesn't know why or how, he just is. His goal is to basically end the Blights by stopping them from happening. He wants to create a free-thinking and intelligent Darkspawn, a race that doesn't decide to lose its shit because it's compelled to follow awakened old gods. This is probably one of the most ambiguous decisions in this game, because this guy is a crafty fuck who tried to negotiate by force, and is only now offering an olive branch while pretending like he didn't throw us into a fucking cell. But his goal, if he's telling the truth, is a good one. I mean, yeah, intelligent Darkspawn is its own issue, but at least they wouldn't be organized against all other races everywhere. What the Architect needs to continue his awakening process is Warden blood, which is used a lot like how Darkspawn blood is used in the Joining. The Mother is a failed experiment of his, one that went crazy along with a few other key figures which he tried to awaken. She started rallying against him shortly after he granted her freedom, and he's been dealing with it ever since. So now we have to decide if we're mowing the Architect down along with the Mother or if we're going to help this guy. While I personally think that it's probably overall safer to not let this mad scientist continue on with his rampant experimentation, and that it would be impossible to convince everyone else that all Darkspawn aren't bad now, I do like the idea of seeing what would happen if the Architect was allowed to live. So I do decide to team up with him here. Now all that's left is to take on the Mother, which we can get some help with by filling out these 3 crystal circles with crystals. I was hoping for a cool weapon or something, but I guess this works. So we stride up to the Mother, who's still babbling insanely. But then she says something interesting, that the Architect was the one who caused the latest Blight. Again, the Architect shows that he's willing to be less than forthright about his decisions, and admits that he did cause it, but not intentionally. Basically, he figured that if he could free the Archdemon by awakening it with his experimentation, then it would free all of the Darkspawn in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, that only prematurely caused the Blight to start, and the Architect chalked it up to a whoopsie. I mean, yeah, sure, I guess his intentions were good, but he's also completely reckless. Either way, my decision's been made and it's time to fight.
Perhaps we will hear the song again when we die. Oh, let it come. Let it come.
Good God, what a great voice actress. So this battle is actually really tough if you're not micromanaging your people. I failed it twice before realizing I needed to stay on top of everyone's positioning, health, stamina, and so on. It was a fun battle, and those crystal circles from before, they could be useful for sure if I found myself in a pinch, but when I buckled down I realized that I didn't need them too much. Basically, one heals the party to full and revives down people, one stuns every enemy, and one deals damage to every enemy. But overall, it's a super fun and engaging fight. When the battle draws to a close, I wind up stabbing the mother once in the titty and once in the head, effectively ending her. And then the aftermath slideshow just starts, like very abruptly. Wonder if BioWare was pressed for time. So to do a brief summary, the other wardens are outraged that I let the architect go and tried to track him to no avail. That said, the Deep Roads became a lot quieter than usual after, so maybe he did make good on his word. Now the really interesting bit is that burning Amaranthine was clearly the bad choice here if that wasn't abundantly clear before. The people of Ferelden regarded my guy as power-hungry, and claimed that this was a move to try to gain more influence, as the keep soon became bigger than Amaranthine with all of the trading reallocating there. Riots broke out more than once against the keep, and they were put down by the wardens every time. Shit, dude. So what would have happened had I chose the other route? Well, the city would have obviously been saved, and they would have began trying to rebuild the keep after it gets wiped out. The citizens would have felt bad for the wardens and tried their best to help. Additionally, if I hadn't fully upgraded the keep, everyone who I left to defend it would have died. Well, actually, I'm not sure if it was everyone. I think it's every single time I miss an upgrade, somebody dies, but I'm not entirely sure. It's still a cool outcome, it's very Mass Effect 2. But the best ending would have been to fully upgrade the keep and to help Amaranthine, as everyone would have lived, and both places would have survived overall. I like that a lot, there's loads of replayability there for sure. The underground area where another dwarven city resided was reclaimed by Orzammar. Roads were cleared and secured to it, and everything was patched up. Anders and Nathaniel stood with the wardens. Nathaniel in particular did a lot to clear the Howe name, eventually reclaiming some land for them and getting a statue erected of himself. I mean, other people did that shit, I don't think he commissioned it or anything. Valana started viewing humans with more sincerity and even defended them from Darkspawn stragglers, which puts a nice bow on her character. I kinda wish I could have seen it happen though. Oh yeah, and then she claims that she saw her sister and disappeared for fucking ever. That's just the end of her character. She saw her sister in the distance and she followed her and now she's gone. Okay, cool. I guess we never really did get a resolution to her sister being taken captive despite all of the setup there. Weird. Anyways, Justice pursued justice, surprisingly enough. He just went out and did cool justice shit, I guess. Then he came back to the wife of the warden whose body he occupied and just fucking dropped dead in front of her. I cannot imagine the trauma that he caused. Sigrun lost all spirit when the mother died, and she just left the Legion apparently. I don't know, whatever. And Oghren continued being a warden, but couldn't act maturely at all whenever his lady and toddler visited him. So Felsi just stopped visiting, and Oghren didn't seem to care. Asshole. And finally, my warden just stopped being a warden. I didn't think that was possible, but yeah, I guess no Darkspawn equals no warden. He never even went back to the keep. I wonder why all the people thought that he raised Amaranthine for power then. With my previous decisions, my guy continued adventuring with Leliana, and that's that. Overall, Awakening is a solid, 7 out of 10? Maybe 8? Someone tell IGN. The DLC adds a lot to the game. It's just a whole nother chapter to it, and it really accomplishes a ton in what it sets out to do in terms of the sheer amount of new stuff. There's content galore here and quite a lot of replayability. It's pretty much impossible to look at it and go, well, it doesn't really do much for the game, because it does. But that said, the writing falters quite a bit. It seemed like BioWare had a lot of ideas that they wanted to jam Awakening with. And they did do that, but it didn't seem like they fleshed out as much of it as they should have. Like when you start out, the game prompts you to fortify the keep and to get to know your companions and to really dig in and just start doing stuff. But then when you're halfway through it, the game starts to peter out in a way. Companions start to become less interesting and fleshed out. Quests seem to end abruptly. Whole setups are just stunted in terms of their outcomes. I honestly wish they'd have just taken a couple of other companions between maybe Zevran, Sten, and Leliana, and just had them show up instead of Justice and Sigrun. It would have saved a lot of focus on these superfluous bits and given the devs time to worry about carving out the other companions a bit more. But the biggest issue that I have is the overall setup. The DLC introduces itself by telling you that there are these two intelligent factions of Darkspawn which have emerged, and it sounds like you're going to have to jump between them and choose a side. That each side would present a compelling argument as to why you should help them. And while the end result isn't the worst with how much they leaned into the architect, I think I would have preferred if the mother was actually a lot less crazy and had a compelling side of her own. Or maybe if someone was behind her pulling the strings. And again, what they came up with wasn't horrible. I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. But I played through nearly the entire DLC wondering when I would get to meet the two sides proper, and when they would present their arguments and explain how they got here. But I didn't get the full picture until the last 15 minutes of gameplay. It's just way too much time to string people along for, and I would have much rather the architect explain himself much sooner. That way maybe if you do side with him, he has you meet with his generals, and they all pledge to ally themselves with you when you're fighting towards the mother. Maybe they each have a task that they want you to complete in order to gain their trust, and they'll reward you with something to earn your trust as well. It would be fun and interesting to watch those bonds form. And even if you did decide to kill the architect, maybe those generals show up to avenge him throughout the gameplay from then on out. I don't know, it just feels weird that I was still unsure about what was going on until the final moments. And being led around by my nose for that long had me caring less overall. Either way, Awakening is obviously the best of the DLC bunch so far, and something tells me that these last two are not going to surpass it. That said, let's hit the Golems of Amgarrak. So this is another standalone DLC, but it does allow you to import your Warden again, even from Awakening. The intro has Lord Dace of Orzammar writing to your guy on the recommendation of Balin. Apparently an area of the former Dwarven Kingdom was discovered which was trying to recreate Caridin's research of golem creation. This area didn't come to fruition, and was abandoned before being rediscovered recently. A group of 20 dwarves was sent to investigate and never came back, one of which was Dace's brother. So here I am, ready to discover more dwarven secrets. Dace is accompanying me as a rogue ranger duelist hybrid. He has a Bronto fighting alongside him, which is cool. I can respec him, but I decided against it for now just to see if we're going to keep him or not. Oh boy. So yeah, there's this wall of fade or something similar which only opens certain ways when the developers want it to, which is a scary way to design the game because first we go over to the right since that's all we can do and find a golem. We go, ooh, a golem, and then we go all the way back to the other side which is now open to find a control rod. And then we go all the way back to the right to use it. And then we go all the way back with our new golem. I miss my haste. At one point, some faded shrieks charge at us before they disappear, and apparently the golem did something because Dace points out that it did. I didn't see it because the thing was all the way back behind me. This is gonna be a long DLC for the wrong reasons. So we carry on, getting faked out by non-existent encounters for a bit before taking on some revenants. The whole time, Dace's dialogue mirrors an Oblivion guard who detected you for a moment but can't find you.
Thought I felt something brush past me. Someone's here. Where did they go? What's going on here? What the? I don't like this.
Eventually, we make it to an area where even more magic shenanigans are going on, in addition to finding Dace's brother, who seems to be trapped in another plane and losing his mind. We keep pressing in, discovering that the area seems to shift based off of lyrium streams being altered. So we do that, and the whole area gets a nice blue filter before we trek back to Dace's brother Brogan and convince him to come with us. Obviously, chests, doors, and so on that we couldn't interact with before are now available to be activated and used, but it still harkens back to that fear that I had. This whole DLC is gonna be backtracking. Basically, you just create a medium-sized map and drag things out by making me retread old ground. And this is kind of how things go for this DLC. You backtrack to the start, turn everything purple, drop a barrier, turn things back, go back to the main room, figure out the correct color code to make red, run back to the red door, and fight the final boss. It's really short and it took me about an hour including respecking my dudes so they don't die as often. The final boss fight is also really annoying, as the thing tends to leap across the room after you defeat its first form. It then summons ads over and over again until you finally defeat it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the difficulty of this entire DLC is overall hard, which I'm fine with. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, Dragon Age Origins combat is not very riveting. What makes it much more fun is having something to fight for. And the story of this DLC is as flimsy as it can be. I just don't care about what's going on here when the DLC seems more about having the player run back and forth to solve a puzzle that can be brute forced in a couple of tries with no repercussions beyond fighting some golems. Because after all is said and done, the forge collapses when we kill the boss and we escape. And then a bunch more of those things start flowing from the forge, and that's all that really happens here. The setup was decent enough with the idea of replicating Carradin's research, but it isn't capitalized on at all, and instead seems to focus on these lyrium wells which aren't explained by anything besides scraps of written lore which you can collect. What a waste of time. Alright, let's finish this thing with Witch Hunt. As you might imagine, it revolves around Morrigan, specifically my guy tracking her down after she told him not to. Well, that's good. That's a fair amount of intrigue without anything overly complicated happening. Let's see if they drop the ball this time. So here I am with my dog at Morrigan's old hut, because someone spotted somebody who was vaguely female snooping around it. Turns out that it's this Dalish lady, who claims that she's here for Morrigan also. Apparently the witch decided to get cozy with some of her clan, and wound up taking off with an important ancient spellbook, which is unsurprising. So the assumption here is that we're going to try to track her down, right? I mean, that's what the elven lady says. But then it's like another quest dialogue got substituted here. She goes, "Alright, we both want to find Morrigan. Anyways, the circle has a library full of ancient books like the one she stole. They won't let me in because I'm a filthy elf, but you're a dwarf who can't even perform magic. So maybe they'll let you in." I think I just got whiplash because it doesn't sound like we're trying to track Morrigan down, it sounds like we're trying to hunt more books down. It doesn't stop there though, as we walk outside and there's just some Darkspawn here. I mean, no one really mentions it, they were just thrown in at this part just because. We head to the circle tower and the elf who's with us almost immediately pulls the race card on the guy up front. Which is funny because she took me with her so that we could come up with a more diplomatic solution to her wanting to visit the circle's library.
What is that supposed to mean? Most Dalish are common thieves?
As you say, the circle is glad to have you as a guest.
You gotta love the eye roll that this dude gives though. So we run through the tower, find a couple of books, and figure out that Morrigan stole a book that correlates to some ancient communication mirror. Apparently there's quite a few of these mirrors, one of which the elf knows about. Last she heard, one was discovered but shattered and abandoned when… take a guess. Go on, why do you think the mirror was abandoned?
Darkspawn.
So now this Melvin wants to come with us to find the mirror too, and thank God for that because he can cast haste. But anyways, I now understand why we were supposed to come here, but it wasn't conveyed well at all. Because the elf doesn't say, well, maybe if we can look up what the book was about, we can figure out where Morrigan went, or what she's trying to accomplish. She says, okay, we both want the witch. Anyways, the book was stolen from the circle, and there are other books on Dalish treasures there. I don't know, whatever. Alright, onward to the circle repository so that we can ask a talking statue where this broken mirror is and if we can even use it. We approach the Templar from before, the elf pulls the race card, we find out that there are sentinels in the repository running amok and decide to go anyways. We get the sentinels under control, ask the statue what's up, and it tells us that we can use the broken pieces to scry for a whole-ass mirror. So now it's off to another dwarven rune to figure out how to even scry in the first place. Look, I'd love to keep explaining every little detail that happens here, but it's not anything mind-blowing by any stretch of the imagination. The past few minutes of summary basically extends to the rest of this DLC, and I'm not really having the best time repeating it all. So the short version of this whole thing is that you investigate the dwarven ruins, figure out how scrying works, and then head off to the broken mirror. This DLC is called Witch Hunt, and while yes, we are quite literally hunting a witch, you would hope that you'd be trailing her a lot more closely. That you'd be finding her notes, her thoughts after she left your warden, figuring out what's going on with your child, finding out why she's tracking these mirrors. Instead, we're on an adventure with a nerd and a woman who seems to have one personality trait revolving around her being an elf with no patience for humans. The thing is, the quest itself isn't offensive. It's not like I'm sitting here going, wow, what a terrible Dragon Age quest. It's just a very average run-of-the-mill side quest that should have been included in the base game. I mean, most of it involves places that we've been to already. Flemeth's hut, the Circle Tower, Shale's family tomb, but backwards. And there is a decent amount of lore involving dwarven and elven relations, which is nice, but it's just not what I'm most interested in. And it doesn't seem to get back to Morrigan until the very end when we hit the elven ruins where the mirror is. When we get to the entrance to where the broken mirror is, the elf asks me about the ring Morrigan gave me, which is a nice touch. Though it also brings up a point that I hadn't thought of, that Morrigan can track my every movement with it. Right. So she should know that we've been on our trail.
If you hate the outside so much, why come with us?
Couldn't pass up a chance to learn more about the ancient elves and the mirrors. Besides, the company is good.
Thanks.
I meant the dog.
So we scry for a mirror, and surprise, it's in the Dragonbone Wastes, aka the final area of Awakening.
Dragons are big, powerful, and they breathe fire! Some people are easily impressed.
So we run back through this shit that we've been through already, but this time, this thing is waiting for us. Hey, that thing's actually pretty damn cool. I mean, it goes down easy, but still. I like that. Good job, devs. So this is the end. We get to Morrigan, who claims that she stopped entering the mirror portal because she sensed the ring that I had. She explains that the child is safe and innocent, but that she has to secure power in order to bring about the change that the child can bring into the world. She claims that Flemeth is still alive out there somewhere, and that she isn't a human or anything else of this world. And most of what she has to say to you is cryptic stuff like that, which is expanded on in later games. Or at least I assume. The more direct things which Morrigan tells you about is that she's sorry that she left you the way that she did, and that it doesn't matter what she personally wants anymore. She's chosen her path and she means to see it to the end. It's a bittersweet moment because there are so many unresolved emotions between her and the Warden. And it's really what this whole DLC should have been about. But I am glad that it at least brought a little more closure to the issues between these two at the very end. There are a couple of things that I want to try out though. First off, I want to know what happens if I toss the ring before I head in to meet her. And secondly, you can choose to attack her if you're role-playing as someone who views her leaving as a betrayal. Tossing the ring doesn't matter, of course, as this time Morrigan waits around because she was just curious apparently. I mean, it is still a nice touch of dialogue for those who held on to the ring all this time, so I don't really have an issue there. I also chose a different dialogue about the mirror, and she claims that it leads to another realm beyond this one and the Fade, and has only been charged for one-time use. Cool. And then we fucking stab her. Yeah, that kinda makes sense. There's just enough ambiguity there to ensure that she's still alive for later, but still a pretty emotional moment which makes me feel like a gigantic dickhead. Overall, Witch Hunt is basically an average side quest with a really cool ending. To elevate it to the next level, I would have really liked it if the whole thing was about Morrigan specifically, instead of just the beginning and the end. It would have been kinda cool if she was messing with multiple mirrors, and if each one of them led to a mini-realm that wasn't quite what she was looking for. To jump through these portals and find traces of her thoughts and plans would have been a lot more interesting than taking Tweedledee and Tweedledum for a ride around the ruins. But I guess it's to be expected after everything else that we've been through DLC-wise. Dragon Age Origins DLC is overall something that I'm glad that I never paid extra for. I think I would have been relatively content with Awakening, but the so-called premium content bug which EA stuck up the world's collective ass really caused a lot of this DLC to be sorely overpriced and underdeveloped. There are way too many extraordinarily average moments for it to have ever been worth more than $30 for literally everything combined. But again, we were right at the height of the DLC craze, before season passes took over and started running their own gamut on the world. I don't know if I can rightly blame BioWare here as much as I want to. I'm sure they were pressed into taking a lot of this stuff and marketing it as amazing new content, but Awakening was the only one that had any business being that. And even then, a lot of its ideas weren't fully fleshed out the way that I would expect from playing the base game. I can confidently state that Dragon Age Origins is probably one of my favorite games of all time after playing it through again, which makes the fact that the DLC turned out the way that it did sting that much more. If you're really hankering for just more stuff to do, then the Ultimate Edition definitely has you covered, as my combined time for everything was around 22 hours. But to me, over half of that time was superfluous side questing that didn't do much for the game. I do think that Shale enhances the base game, specifically in Orzammar and the Deep Roads areas, and I am probably going to take it along for any future playthroughs. I also think that a lot of the ideas of Awakening with its new components and a few of the companions are really fun to mess around with. But that's really the most positive that I can be here, as a lot of the other stuff just made me want to mash my way through it, which isn't something that I'm used to wanting to do with this game. I don't think we'll see the end of DLC as a whole, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's been a lot of pushback from people everywhere over shoddy and underdeveloped DLC, and it's led to some developers really coming up with some great stuff that enhances the base game. FromSoft has historically been pretty damn good with the Soulsborne games. New Vegas and Borderlands 2 had some amazing additions which really made their games feel completely refreshed. The Witcher 3 and Oblivion had whole swaths of content that created entirely new realms of ideas. I could go on, but I listed all of these as examples of the gold standard for additional content. And when you stack them against what Origins brings to the table, it's a night and day difference. Thanks for watching. Before I get to my outro stuff, let's talk about my returning sponsor, Micro Center.
Long ago in the ancient times, computers simply appeared through what witnesses describe as a legendary portal of dark magic. Some believed that this mighty device was a construct created only when fused with the souls of the righteous by a benevolent god. Others believed the machine to be a force of chaos, one that could only have emerged from the darkest depths. These myths were dispelled when a hero emerged among the commoners, one who decided to open the PC to deconstruct it. This legendary hero, known only as the Creator, then began to teach the others the way of PC building, passing down the knowledge from generation to generation.
I mentioned in the last video that I've been visiting Micro Center for years now. It's one of the places that I've really missed being able to go to for tech components since moving to Germany. I believe the last time I was there, they had these gaming chairs menacingly aimed down towards my head, and it was a little scary. I mean, we all know that a good gaming chair will increase your gamer reflexes by at least 0.01 milliseconds, but there's really no need to display that kind of dominance in the store like that. But rampant displays of power aside, Micro Center has always been one of the first things that I recommended to a friend when they were looking to pick up a new PC part. Really though, they've got tons of tech gear ranging from computers and computer accessories, networking equipment, the aforementioned gaming chairs, TVs, and so on. It's always been this little playground for me personally, and I'm really excited to be sponsored by them because of it. I know that not everyone has one within close range of them, but if you do want to talk tech with other enthusiasts, you can always drop by the online community for help with any questions that you might have. And if you like free gear, Micro Center is giving away free 240GB SSDs to new customers who can manage to pick it up in store through my link in the description. If anything I've said in the past 2 minutes or so has struck a chord with you, feel free to check out Micro Center. Thanks, guys. It's been fun revisiting the world of Dragon Age, even if I was hoping for a bit more substance. And I'm excited to get to Dragon Age 2 maybe sometime later this year. For now though, I'm gonna shift back to a different topic. Not sure what yet, but we'll see. Until then, I've got a shirt that looks like this. Good God, what a shirt! There are other shirts too if that first one doesn't cut it for you. I've also got a Twitch where I stream nearly every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. I've got a Twitter where I tweet shit out infrequently. I've got a Discord where people chat in the meantime, probably. And I've got a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.